going to close, and we are about to leave this extremely sheltered community and head out into the whole wide world. And in this wide world, it is inevitable that we are going to have to make very difficult moral decisions, and it is inevitable that we are going to come into contact with people who we consider to be a them, an other, an out group. People we can have great difficulty relating to in any way, shape, or form. Today I'm going to talk about how the ways we perceive people, even subconsciously, affects our actions and what we can do. This is a talk about morals, so you're going to come away from this thinking, wow, he just presented us with some massive bull. In fact, you're going to think that in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, that is some massive bull right there, right? That big one, that is Knickers. Knickers is a steer, a sterilized male on an Australian farm. Those are all like, the other ones are like full-grown cows, like this thing is massive. So in 2018, Knickers took the internet by storm, he became a meme, and what I found very interesting was how people suddenly really seemed to develop a great deal of empathy for Knickers. The Guardian wrote that Knickers' story is one of hope and reprieve. Pearson tried to offload him last month, only to be told by the meat processors said the steer was just too large for the abattoir. So grammar mistakes aside, the big guy's fine because he's too big to be killed. The other guys are all going to get slaughtered, and this is a story about hope. Why do we care about Knickers, but we don't care about the others? And in fact, there's a whole literature of people suddenly developing massive empathy for an animal that gets slaughtered in huge amounts. For example, one cow escaped in Poland and swam to an island. And a rich Polish guy, I think it was Polish, I know he was in Poland, he said he was actually willing to buy that cow in order to save it from the slaughter. And he said he's not vegetarian, but this type of bravery and heroism deserves to be rewarded. These are cows! What happened? Right? I think one thing quite clearly, the media starts to give them names, and that makes us get more attached to them. However, I would actually say, the way one newspaper said, that when a large group of cows escapes, people don't care if they go back to the slaughterhouse. Small group of cows, that's something people get behind. And I'd argue we perceive a large group as categorically different from a small group. I'll show you what I mean. So this is a chart developed by Susan Fiske about how we think about members of other groups, right? So we have warmth. Are they nice, mean? Do they have good souls? Are they benevolent? Are they a menace? And then we have competence. How smart are these guys? If they want to do something, are they going to get it done? How much agency do we have? Now, a large group of escaped cows is bottom left, right? Dumb animals, dangerous, we perceive them as a threat, and a cow can be a really dangerous animal, right? Small group, once you start throwing around words like heroic cow, outwits the police, we start to get something we can work with, right? We start to project admirable traits onto them. Now Knickers. Knickers didn't escape. He's not a threat to anyone. Isn't he so cute, right? Look, he's protecting that cow. I love this so much, right? So, Knickers gets to go up here, right? Not competent, dumb animal, we see him in a very patronizing way, but we love him so much. I think right at the top, right above Knickers, would be your family dog. Like, incredibly stupid, but if anything happens to him, I would break down and cry. And so that was my initial thought, right? This is an out-group who were thinking about positively, but then I realized some people were thinking about Knickers as one of us. Too fat to be killed is a 2019 move. Sincere congrats to Knickers the cow. Suddenly we go from Knickers, the foreign entity, to Knickers, just another creature trying to survive 2019, which they thought was a bad year. So that got me thinking. If through context clues and manipulation and the way it's presented, we can change the way we think about cows, how can we change the way we think about people? Cows do have personalities, there's individual differences between cows, but that's not really relevant here. It's about how they're presented. So I want to talk about my mother. So my mother grew up in Linwood, Australia, and when she was there, kids from her school would come up to her and they would ask, Lydia, why do your eyes look like this? Right, totally wrong, super racist stereotype. They see like an immigrant family from Malaysia, white Australia policy, boo, right? For some reason, these kids who went to the same school as her, same school district, were really, really interested in finding a reason why they were really different from her. This type of overt extreme racism is so different from what I experienced personally that it's almost irrelevant to me at this point, right? I'm not going to have people tell me that. But what it did really interest me is this idea of human us versus them, right? Us versus them is something which is implicit in all social species, particularly primates, right? We have the in-group, our hunter-gatherer tribe chilling in Africa, and then we have out-groups, other groups, tribes we bump into, and we're much nicer to members of the in-group. Chimpanzees have really complicated social structures for how they deal with members within their own group, and at the same time, they commit genocide towards other chimpanzee bands. And us versus them is universal, right? It's just inherent to humans, and we can't turn it off, but we can mitigate it, and we can figure out how to deal with it. You'll notice I'm being really vague with who's an us and who's a them. That's because it's a flexible category. The following psychological study was done on university students. These were not racist people with racist beliefs, but you sit those people down in front of a chair, and you flash faces in front of them really quickly. So quickly that they're only seeing them at a subconscious level. And if one of those faces happens to be from someone of a different race, the amygdala activates, a part of your brain responsible for fear. Now that's not good, right? That's part of the reason why you're more likely to mistake a cell phone for a gun if it's being held by someone of a different race. So, oh no, are we doomed to be these horrible racist beasts and there can never be peace on Earth? Not quite, right? Take the same faces and you put football caps on them. This is assuming, of course, the person in the study cares about football. And you're still flashing them at subconscious speeds. Now the face of someone from a different race, but who's wearing a football cap of your favorite team, no fear response. Face of someone from the same race as you, wearing a football cap of your hated rival team, fear response. Suddenly it's not about us and them in terms of race, it's us and them in terms of what's the best football team. So the response is automatic, but it's also dependent on environment. So let's get back to this little step, right? Who do we put in the top right corner? Who's competent and nice and everyone loves this group, person, whatever? Who's top right? Well, obviously me, yeah? But more importantly, us. We really, really like us. We tend to be much more forgiving and generous towards members of what we perceive to be an in-group in economic games. Now what's an in-group, out-group can be ridiculous, right? Planet of the Apes movie, 1980s, the actors playing chimpanzees and the actors playing gorillas ate lunch in separate groups. That is how easy it is to divide people. And generally, when someone in our group messes up, we try to explain it more, right? When we mess up, it's because of circumstances. When they mess up, that's just how they are, and they're all the same. These are more general emotions, right? Us evokes pride, someone we consider high in competence and warmth, but who's an out-group evokes admiration. In America, this tends to be the middle class, distinguished African-American intellectuals, good Christians. Then what about low competence, high warmth? That's pity, that's the elderly, the mentally disabled, right? We like them, but they can't really think of themselves, we need to take care of them. And sometimes that gets very condescending. What about the opposite? Low warmth, high competence. Well, these people, they're really mean, and they don't assimilate, they're out to get you, and you can't trust them. But they know how to make money, and if you're sick, you should go see one of them who's a doctor. In Europe, this was, and still partially is, the stereotype towards Jews. If you live in a former European colony, this is how you would see your European colonialists, where competence is how effectively they exploited your nation. This is also the negative stereotype many people have towards Asians, right? The cold, unthinking, militaristic automaton, but damn, they are good at math. That's the stereotype. It's not real. Low, right? These are the people we are disgusted by or terrified of. These are muggers, criminals, in many societies, people on welfare. This is pretty abstract. Here's an actual chart, 2002, right? So once you get over the initial shock of, oh no, we're all racist monsters, we're all doomed, these categories sort of overlap. You can be like a man, and Hispanic, and elderly, and homeless, right? You can be a member of different groups. And which group we see someone as a member of can be changed by cueing. Show people a photo of an Asian woman putting on makeup, they their subconscious biases tend towards woman. Show them a picture of her holding chopsticks, subconscious biases tend towards Asian. So the question is, what do we do, right? This us versus them is something inherent to us as a species. We've seen, right, even in people who aren't racist, there's still some sort of response depending on the circumstance. So what can we do as individuals to make sure that all these subconscious urges drive us towards positive rather than negative actions? Well, one thing is, it's all to do with relatedness. Just as it's possible for us to think that Knickers is one of us, it's possible for us to think that one of us is like an animal that we are okay with being slaughtered. That is why before a genocide, the victim groups get dehumanized. In Rwanda, the Tutsi were referred to as cockroaches. In Germany, Nazi propaganda depicted Jews as animals as well. Be very careful of anyone who's calling an outgroup something as disgusting or dehumanizing. I would even be critical of anyone who starts to talk about a flood of refugees. Now, what about on the conscious level? Flash the same pictures up for longer, and so that they can consciously process it. Right? Face of a different race comes up, fear, amygdala activates, prefrontal cortex activates, shuts down the amygdala. Prefrontal cortex has a lot to do with rationality, impulse control. It makes you do the harder thing. The thing is, the prefrontal cortex chews through calories like crazy, which means that in a stressful, extreme situation, you might not do that. Therefore, we can't just rely on conscious suppression. Things that use up a bit less energy is taking other people's perspective, which is a good way to reduce bias. Making unconscious biases conscious, that makes people uncomfortable, so we also can't rely on everyone to do that. Or asking people to think of a positive counterexample. The men's scores on sexism tests went down when they were encouraged to imagine a strong image of a positive image of a strong woman beforehand. So that's the conscious level. There's some things we can do, but those things are hard, so in extreme situations, we might not do them. Emotional priming. Blast your average white American with aggressive rap music, and they are more likely to score higher on an anti-African American bias test, right? If you're interacting with someone from an outgroup, a them, someone you know you perceive as a them, try to make sure your worst stereotypes about them aren't being confirmed around you. On a more personal level, if you prime people with this awesome inspirational cow story, you can actually talk to them about really uncomfortable things. So what about one of us, right? Not thinking about them as a them, but one of us. Again, the football caps thing, getting people to feel like they're on the same team. What helps, bringing groups together on equal footing, having them play games together, where you're low-stakes games where you're working towards a common goal. This is something which can be done. It's difficult to organize, easy to mess up. What about individuals? Getting us to see someone not as a them, as a member of a group, but as an individual. Like Knickers, right? He's got a name. We love Knickers. Who here loves Knickers? There we go. Okay? So, individuals. Put a fruit in front of the faces and ask people, do you think that face would like to eat that fruit? Race stops activating much of anything, because now we're thinking about personality, individual preferences, we're imagining people going home and eating. There's some seeing things from others' perspective, but there's also focusing on them as individuals. A personal suggestion to you guys is, if you're going to interact with someone regularly, learn their name. I recently learned that my bus driver is called Aziz, and it's made the whole atmosphere on the bus trip much nicer, because now I feel a bit less distant to the person who largely determines whether or not I die in a car crash on the way to school. So it's been extremely relaxing, right? Names. So I'd like to thank Robert Sapolsky. A whole lot of the ideas in this talk were lifted directly from his book, Behave, which I really recommend everyone reads. Us versus them is something inherent to humans, or basically it's inherent to society. Some of our best, most wonderful moments come from feeling like we're part of a group. We can't eliminate it, but by making us aware of some of the worst things it can do to us and some of its most toxic aspects, we can eliminate the worst of our behavior and hopefully maximize the best. Cow!
Yeah, thank you, Sidney. This is a very interesting, of course, talking about human morality and what we can do better as people, especially looking at the side of us being the people. So let's all give another round of applause for Sidney.